Hey, are you on the fence about something that you have been really thinking about and really wanting to get started on, whether that's a personal thing or a professional thing, and you're just waiting for everything to line up perfectly before you get rolling? I like to call that waiting for the stars and the moon to align. And if that is you and you are looking for a nudge, consider this podcast episode your nudge because this is episode 66 of Handled Ish Productivity for the Imperfect, a weekly podcast for those who want to elevate their productivity and are not looking for perfection. I'm your host, Betsy Hayes, and I'm really happy you're here with me for what I think is going to be a really important episode. And I'm calling it Don't Wait for the Stars and the Moon to Align. And I've been thinking about this because there's a couple of things that I want to do. One is personal, one is professional that I believe are going to really be awesome and valuable. And they're a little scary and can, include taking risk and being brave and putting myself out there. And when we're in those situations, as humans, we often like to wait for everything to be lined up, right? All the ducks to be in a row, it to be perfect timing. We will have done X and Y and Z before we get rolling because that's when we feel we will be fully prepped, blah, 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 right? And I have been reflecting on a lot of really, really great things that have happened in my life, and none of them have been when the stars and the moon have been aligned. And if I would have waited for that, I might even still be waiting. So I wanted to share a couple of those thoughts and under the auspices of really encouraging you that if, the stars and the moon are aligned a little bit, a skosh, just do it because so often everything does line up once you get started. But that doesn't happen unless you get started. And so waiting until all our ducks are in a row, whatever metaphor you want to use, is often a recipe for delaying something that could be amazing. And sometimes we delay, for our whole lives and never actually do it. And that is a little bit sad and sometimes a little bit tragic. So I don't want that to happen to any of you. I'm starting way back with having kids and going to grad school. The stars and the moon were definitely not aligned for both of those things because I did them at the same time. So, wanted to have children, also needed to go to grad school in order to start my teaching career. And, didn't think that waiting on either of them was going to serve us and me. And so I started grad school and then had my first child right in the middle of it. And clearly, that is not an ideal scenario. I don't recommend. However, if you have to do it, you can. It's totally possible. I am proof. I have this really funny, very distinct memory of my daughter being 2 weeks old near the end of the semester and taking my mom and my daughter to campus to turn in a paper because this was before we turned in papers electronically. And the elevator was broken. And so we schlepped the stroller and Samantha and mom and I up the stairs. Why we thought we needed to bring the stroller up the stairs, I have no idea. But I have this very distinct memory, and it was a lot of humor. And the reason, of course, we wanted to go with Samantha was to let my department chair and my department secretary get a chance to meet her. First baby. Those of you who have been there know that you just want everyone, to meet your kid. And so everything worked out, but it was hilarious and just another reminder of how it definitely wasn't perfect timing for either having children or getting my master's degree. As a result, it took me twice as long as most people take in order to get their master's degree, but doesn't matter. I got it. No one has ever asked me how long it took me to get it. You always put the end date on your resume, not the beginning. And to be honest, I don't even think anyone would ever care if they knew that it took me twice as long as, quote, typical, right? So that's a really great example of, you just ducks are in a row-ish to go with the brand of the podcast, and you just need to do it if it's something important for you to do, right? Obviously, it all worked out. Two beautiful children, a completed master's degree, a teaching career that has been so amazing. all when the timing was completely imperfect. With my second child, the timing was also imperfect because I had her at the end of my first year of teaching. Again, you probably wouldn't consider that an ideal set of timing, but it worked out beautifully. And obviously, could not be happier to have them. Let's see, what else? Oh, book writing. When Tori and I started working on our book projects, it was right in the middle of me getting tenure. Again, not exactly perfect timing, but the opportunity presented itself, and we thought we could make it work, and we did. And that again has been one of the most wonderful things that I've ever done and continues, right? We're just about to publish the second edition of our first book in July. So could not be more excited about that. And it was an amazing, fabulous experience, even though the timing wasn't perfect. This podcast, we've talked about the timing being imperfect, but I don't think I've quite gone into the depth of that. So this podcast started toward the end of my sabbatical, and my sabbatical project was actually to create a podcast called Central Valley Stories, Advertising and Public Relations. And I did in-depth audio interviews with a baker's dozen 13, because I really like the idea of a baker's dozen. I hope you do too. It's very fun. Of a baker's dozen legends in our local area in advertising and public relations, and create these very gorgeous hour-ish long podcast episodes as part of my sabbatical project. And so I was finishing completing those. Those were going to launch the following year in February. And I, decided to start this podcast a little bit simultaneously. So the first episode of this podcast dropped on January 9th, and the Central Valley Stories podcast dropped about a month later, which is not the stars and the moon aligning, right? It's a little bit confusing, right? It's like, oh my gosh, how many podcasts does she have? Blah, blah, blah. However, it was important to me, obviously, to finish and do a good job on my sabbatical project, which ended up just being something I'm incredibly proud of. And it was also really important for me to not wait any longer to start this podcast. I think I mentioned I had some really cool support from a dear friend who owns a PR firm, and the nudge was so like neon flashing lights that like, girl, you need to do this now, or maybe you're never going to do it. And again, stars and the moon were not aligned. Conversely, when I chose to be department chair, or when I chose to run for department chair, that was something I waited on because I wanted both of my children to be out of high school before I chose to run for department chair. And that's what I did. And so I thought that the stars and the moon were aligned as far as that's concerned. Interestingly, it didn't end up being the world's perfect timing, either for me or my family. And it was an experience that I learned so much from, and I'm not sad at all that I did it. Upon reflection, yeah, I was wrong about the timing being perfect, which I find very ironic, right? Because it was the one time I'm like, okay, I got all my ducks in a row. So I think the bottom line is we actually don't know when all of our ducks are in a row. That is something that we as humans have no ability to actually ascertain. So when you have something that's really, calling to you, right? It's something that will add tremendous value to your life, personally, professionally, both. And you can see at least a little bit down the path as far as maybe what your first and second steps are. I just encourage you to go and do it. The steps will reveal themselves as you go throughout the path. And if they don't, that means that maybe this path isn't one that you need to go down. And that is super helpful too, right? Imagine waiting your whole life to do something, not doing it. And actually, that wasn't something you were supposed to do anyway. And so you wasted all of that time and effort on that particular thing. So you're never going to know if this is your thing unless you go ahead and get started. So this podcast, episode 66, on this particular moment in time, whenever you are listening to it or watching it, consider this your nudge. I feel very strongly that for whatever reason, I woke up today and was not going to do this episode of a podcast. I had several others I was going to record today, but I just feel that this is your nudge. So go do it. Super pumped for you, whatever it is. Please let me know, whatever it is. And I look forward to cheering you on from the virtual sidelines from Podcast Land. And be sure to tune in next time for the next episode of Handled Ish Productivity for the Imperfect. And I look forward to visiting with you then. So until then, please take care and please be kind to yourself because I absolutely promise with all my heart that you are doing way better than you think you are. Trust me.